As Election Day approaches next month, Mornings on One has invited all of the candidates for statewide office to join us in studio to talk about their pitch to voters. With us this morning, the Republican candidate for State Attorney General, Michael Henry, a lawyer with his own practice. He specializes in commercial litigation. He lives in Queens. He's seeking public office for the first time. Thank you for being here.
Thank you very much for having me.
What prompted you to get into this race, particularly in a race where there is a Democratic incumbent who is well in place in this role?
Sure. For me, it was the one-party control of the state, and I think the lack of balance in government and seeing the repercussions that it's had on the people of the state of New York. The other thing that has troubled me with this office in particular is for far too long it's been utilized for two reasons. The first one is to become the next governor, and the second one is to weaponize it against political opponents. And I, as a political outsider and non-career politician, want to restore a level of competency, efficiency, and integrity to the office where I believe it's lacking. And I believe that this office could do a lot of good for the people of the state of New York, and it's been more used as a stepping stone for politicians than it has been to do the work of the people of the state of New York.
Well, in fact, we saw that with Letitia James. She was into the governor's race, and then she wasn't again.
Right.
When you look at the way she handled the investigation into Andrew Cuomo's misconduct, what would you have done differently in those circumstances?
Right. So she holds a press conference and implies that he broke criminal law. And then she says that there were 11 brave women that were forcibly touched, groped, and kissed, and she fails to issue criminal referrals. So if you believe that someone broke the law, you should issue criminal referrals to the local district attorneys and sheriffs, because what she did by not issuing criminal referrals, and I said this at the time, was she handicapped their access to the evidence. And then the first time many of them seen it was when she splashed it onto the internet in her failed run for governor. The other aspect of it, it was a pretty shoddy investigation. There were times that didn't match up. There was information about witnesses that were basically withheld. And whether or not you like Andrew Cuomo or whether or not you're in the same party as him, just like anyone else, he's entitled to due process. And I think it was clear that she used this press conference to launch her run for governor instead of actually getting to the bottom of what she claims really happened.
So I was going through your opponent's campaign materials, going back through some press releases from the AG's office. She's been active. I mean, cracking down on polluters, scam artists, fighting for gay rights, abortion rights, workplace safety, voting rights, whistleblower protection, predatory lending, gun sales, federal overreach. There's a lot there. Your campaign website is simpler, for better or for worse. You're really focusing on three issues. Number one is crime, which a lot of that happens outside the jurisdiction of the Attorney General in terms of what's prosecuted, what's not, how law enforcement is handled. What is it about that issue that caused you to put that at number one on your campaign materials?
What I see every day. For example, I was in Bay Parkway in Brooklyn just last week, and I'm walking store to store, and Asian business owners after Asian business owners telling me how they're being robbed on average for $200 to $300 a day. I've met with the victims of numerous families. I've met with victims of people who have lost loved ones. I've also been to multiple police officer funerals. And for me, this office, yes, they say there is a lack of jurisdiction. There are things you can do. Number one, as Letitia James famously says, you have a bully pulpit. The second thing you could do is work in conjunction with local district attorneys to make sure they have the resources they need. As I've traveled this state, there's been district attorneys, especially in rural counties, who said they used to work in conjunction with the AG's office to stop drug trafficking on the corridors. They don't have that anymore. I could introduce program bills into the state legislature to try to put in policies that would help cut down crime. And I could work in conjunction with not only some of the task force in the state and in the local district attorney's offices, but also with the federal government if there's something that we could do jointly where there's federal jurisdiction. So there are things you can do to help cut down on crime.
One Republican refrain we've heard during this campaign is bail reform's a problem, bail reform's a problem. The reality is it's not that simple. All of the crime can't be tied specifically to bail reform. Is that just something easy for people to get their heads around, that we hear that refrain so frequently?
Well, it's multiple things. I think we have a parole board that's putting out a lot of violent criminals back out onto our streets. Less is more is making it where people that are trying to integrate back into society are not being held accountable when they're committing crimes, because when you're on parole, you're actually still completing your sentence. And what we're seeing is people are committing crimes and they're being allowed to just go back out onto our streets. The raise the age has also been a problem. And yes, bail reform, I know people, look, when it was pitched to the public, it was to make sure that non-violent first-time offenders are not sitting in jail because they're poor. And I think everyone agrees with that. but we are the only state out of 50 that does not have a dangerousness standard when a judge is taking into account bail. The other problem you have with this law is there are crimes that are violent, types of arson, robbery. If you use a gun and you don't discharge it, you fall into the purview of cashless bail. And that's a problem because these are violent crimes. And the other thing is, like I said last week, people are being robbed. Stores are going out of business. And to say these are victimless crimes is not fair because people are literally shutting down their small businesses due to all the robberies and the burglaries. And we can't have a society that functions like this. I'm a supporter of treatment courts. I don't want nonviolent offenders caught up in the system for 20, 30 years. And there's a way we could do that, but there's a way we could do it by also making sure that the violent recidivist criminals are staying behind bars, because a lot of people are living in fear and a lot of violent criminals are doing whatever they want, whenever they want, wherever they want. And it's because they have a no consequence, no fear attitude.
Let's look ahead to this election. If you were successful, this is an office of 1,800 people. It's a big enterprise that you would be in charge of. You mentioned you run a small business. What qualifies you to run this large an office?
Well, prior to being an attorney, I was actually in the mortgage industry and I was in management, so I do have management experience. Also, I've managed a diverse workforce. And I also think that something that we need is judgment. I think that a lot of these bureaus at this office need to be streamlined. There needs to be a level of efficiency in these offices, cut down on some of the bureaucracy. I cannot remove anybody who is a civil servant from that office, but the attorneys and the bureau chiefs serve at the discretion of the Attorney General. And what I've seen as I've traveled this state is there is a real lack of coordination in this office, and it's very non-responsive, and many of the bureaus to the needs that a lot of the people of this state are facing. So I would look to professionalize the office, take the politics out of the office. If you're an independent or a Democrat and you're competent and you want to work for me, I'm not going to have a litmus test. I want people that are competent and want to serve the people and run the office efficiently.
And you would stay away from the Trump politics that have defined a lot of Republican politics?
Look, where I am right now is there's an investigation that when I get into office in January, I'm going to have to review with a clear mind, and I'm going to have to make a tough decision. In contrast to my opponent, who campaigned on finding crimes on people and declaring their guilt before she was sworn in, I am going to review every investigation with a clear mind and determine what's in the best interest of the people of the state of New York moving forward. And I'm not going to be a political attorney general. I'm going to be an efficient attorney general and a professional attorney general.
Good to have you here this morning. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I should also mention that we reached out to the current Attorney General running for re-election, Letitia James. We asked her to join us for an interview about the race. Her team has not yet committed to a day that she might be able to join us.